SSHFS is an incredibly powerful way to connect to a remote system and actually the files on that system. The cool thing is you can even connect to a system over the internet and mount a file system on your local computer even though it's across the internet. It's really cool. Now you can use SSH keys to make this kind of more automatic, but you don't have to. You can actually type in your password to make sure that you're securely connecting to a remote computer. And the cool thing is, like I said, you can use this across the entire internet. So let's say we're on this local computer and we would like to get to the files on this computer over here. Well, if you can SSH into this computer, whether it's across the internet or just across your local area network, as long as you can use SSH to get to that computer, you can use SSHFS to mount it on your local system. Now, if it's across the internet and the connection's slow, obviously the access to that file system is going to be as slow as your internet connection. So it's not like it's magic, but it is pretty neat that you can mount a remote file system on your local file system using SSH as the transfer method. Now, there's a package called, not surprisingly, SSHFS to go about mounting that remote file system. Now I'm logged into a workstation computer here. I'm Bob at workstation, and what I want to do is connect to a remote computer called Node 1. So I'm just going to first SSH into there. So SSH Node 1, and I need to know the password there, so type in my password. And now you'll see I'm SSH'd over to Node 1. If we type ls, we can see, okay, my node stuff, Node 1 is the best, and nodefile1.txt. So these are the files on the remote Node 1 file system. So let's type exit. All right, I'm going to clear the screen. And now if we look on our local file system, we have desktop downloads and an empty folder called test. So if we look in test, there's nothing there. I just created this empty folder. And we can use the SSHFS program, so SSHFS, and I'm going to tell it the remote file system that I want to mount. In our case, it's going to be Node 1. Now, we could say if it was a different username, we could specify the name. Now, it's the same name. It's the Bob username on the remote system, but I'm still going to specify it just so you can see what it would look like. So Bob at Node 1 :/home Bob. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm saying I want the Bob user to connect to the Node 1 server, and I want to mount home Bob, meaning Bob's home directory on the remote computer, and I want to mount that on my local computer in the test directory that's right here. So press enter. It should ask me for Bob's password. I'll type in Bob's password, and now it's mounted. We can type mount, and we're going to see, sure enough, down here, Bob at Node 1 is mounted on home Bob test. And we can look by typing ls test and see, sure enough, those files that we saw when we SSH'd over to Node 1 are now mounted locally on our computer. So these are the same files that are on that remote system. And if we were to make a change, it would be reflected on the remote system because it is that system that is mounted locally. It's just using SSH or fuse.sshfs. This is the entire package that allows us to use SSH, but it's using this SSH file system as the transfer method to connect back and forth to that remote computer. Now, if we had SSH keys installed, we wouldn't even have to type Bob's password when we mounted the remote system. But it's really awesome to be able to connect to a remote system using SSHFS. The one thing you have to remember, though, is that it's only going to be as fast as the connection to the other computer. So if you're trying to connect to a remote server over dial-up, you're going to be able to do it, but when you type ls, it's going to be painfully slow as it shows you the directory contents of that remote system because it still can only go as fast as the connection to the remote machine. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.